I just sent it to that email list. So if you're not on it, then let's.
Leslie sends them to me.
Are you middle school? Are you on the middle school one?
I don't know. The only communication I get is from Leslie.
Yeah.
So she's the one that forwarded me the information about this meeting, or I wouldn't have even known about this.
I've been emailing you. I realized after you did your email.
Yeah, I know. I knew that too. But will you just plug in your email address and I'll send you the link real quick.
Okay. Oh, I hit send. I probably shouldn't have hit send. Okay.
Should be blank there. Novice policies. That's right.
Hey.
He's
signing us up for the
anyone else
email
not
list.
received the email that went to the listserv for the Google Doc we'll be using for this presentation?
She'll need it too.
I'm like, because I remember I offered to host one, but I still don't.
You didn't get
I've never done it, so I was like hoping that. Okay. Is the Granger coach still there? John?
I probably didn't.
Yeah. I don't think West Jordan has a coach.
Okay.
They.
Oh, that's okay. Do you see the emails like here? So one of that I sent out this morning.
I heard she hopped over to the new.
But double
that
check
new
if you don't
school in
have it.
Harriman?
Then
And then I don't know if they ever got anyone to replace it. I cannot remember her name for the life of me, but I'm wondering if someone does and we can track her down. She was around for a little bit, but then we also I could say that was one kid or something like that.
Kath, are you doing this one?
Yes.
Yeah. Can I put you in charge of adding things that are brought up? I'm good. Everyone else has this viewing. So we got about 45 minutes to talk about novice policy debate. I'll tell you for our junior high coaches, the perspective is going to be from high school, but a lot of the arguments when we talk about the topic packet that is used for high school are going to be the arguments used in middle school. Just always keep that disclaimer in the back of your mind that as you probably know, the speech times, the format is shorter. So some of the challenges of high school policy debate are not the challenges that we have at the junior high level. But ask questions. That's the context, but it doesn't mean that's the exclusive focus. So the main emphasis of this talk is going to be the novice evidence packet, the rules, the expectations, maybe how to use it, but also the content. What are those arguments? What are you going to be sharing and coaching your students to read? But I have a few other comments on some resources that you can use, and you can see at the top I'm going to talk about mindset for just a moment. But are there questions that you wanted addressed for sure? You think novice policy, why'd you sign up for this? What can I speak to in the little bit of time that we have? You can definitely ask along the way, but it just kind of gives me a chance to make sure we have time to cover anything. Yeah.
My main one is just what are the middle school like the problem areas going to be?
Yeah, and I think what we should do at lunch is we as an ad hoc committee can just adopt them.
Okay.
Like here's our we just need it's going to be very similar to the novice evidence packet. So the novice evidence packet is a pared down, limited set of arguments that high school novice students can read. It then coincides pretty well historically over the last couple of years that the limitations of the topic that we put in for middle school, the problem areas, are the same ones as the novice packet. So that's what I mean by there'll be some overlap. But I'll say this just from the start. In middle school, you have policy, you have LD, and now some of the individual events. But policy debate and LD debate were the only two offerings as recent as like 4 years ago. In high school, it's one of 8, 9, 10 different event offerings, and it's because of those opportunities, a lot of coaches focus on the more accessible, easier events, and the hardest thing about coaching novice policy is just getting kids to do it, because it's easy to be like, hey, you want to do an impromptu round, right? It'll be over in 7 minutes. Or do you want to do this policy debate? They'll take an hour and 20 minutes, and you're going to have to read a lot more than you have to do in any of your. It's hard to keep them in that. So I think part of what I wanted to share with you is just trying to inculcate a certain mindset within your policy event group, on your own team, that they're trailblazers. They're you respect them because of the challenge they're taking on. Policy debate's great because in addition to it being part of state, and you can get massive points at the state tournament if you're talking about competing as an overall school. Most of the colleges that do debate really look to experience in the advanced debate categories, and policy debate is something that will give them college scholarships. And if you can, get them to, some people say work their way up. Start with impromptu, then Congress, then extemp, then LD, and then eventually policy. If you're giving them the option of picking any of those, they will stop usually at the one that they first like, or the one that they think is maybe the easiest, depending on their effort level. And it's going to be really hard to get them to policy. I've found that if you actually, there's pros and cons to both of these, but if you start them in the debate events, start them in policy, you can always shift down. And by shift down, I mean policy debate, it's twice as long as a public forum round, twice as long as an LD round. I'm not going to pass too much judgment on the relative value of each, but I will be pretty direct at saying policy is the most challenging. And given that you can always slow down, you can always say, all right, policy, you went to a couple tournaments, you feel like you're struggling or you want to try something else, great. Take what you learned from going to a policy tournament, apply that in public forum, right? Flowing and taking notes in policy will be taking notes and flowing in public forum. Reading and speaking out loud, using evidence, thinking on their feet in policy. We'll be using the other events, but it's harder to speed up. But I said kind of make them believe, hopefully, if you're saying, I don't have any policy debaters, or I only have so few, and they usually give up, you really have to be able to pull them aside and say that they're doing the Lord's work. They are doing the important task of building the program, where it's like you're looking to them as whatever value set you want to have, but it's like they need to feel like they are the crusaders, they are the missionaries, they are doing something that no one else on the team is doing, and it's hard, but that's their charge, and that's why you believe they can do it, right? It's like, who are you asking to do policy debate? Make sure that they know that they're doing that not because they have to, or because I know they have to buy into it, the mindset. That's just getting them to start. So either just kind of getting them to an early tournament. There's obviously novice divisions, but about 5 years ago, recognizing that policy debate is hard and recognizing that it's inaccessible and can be really intimidating, the UDCA decided to adopt a limitation on the amount of arguments and types of arguments that could be run. That was tricky. That was year one, and there was no evidence packet. It was just to hear the affirmative case areas that you could do, or here's the negative case areas. But there was too much interpretation, too much wiggle room, that it didn't really set a limit. Because if I said you had to, read an argument about academic achievement on an education topic, testing. Like, well, suddenly there's all sorts of different test areas. Anyway, so following that, we decided to do a closed deck of cards, of files, of cases that every team would have, and you could only use those in the competition for the first semester. So it's the only evidence that's allowed. You can find it, it's on the website, but there's a link to the resources. There's a Dropbox file, but these are Word documents, electronic Word documents. You could print them, but they're electronically available to read and use, manipulate, but you can download them all there, and we'll be looking at those. Just the first semester. After that, in January, the training wheels come off, and they can start going to varsity tournaments or using other original evidence that they found. So you might, I've heard it's like, that discourages original research. They're just using stuff that's already pre-made for them. Have the long view on it. If you can get them in the first semester to just be comfortable with the mechanics of policy debate and the mechanics of like what evidence should look like and feeling comfortable being judged, all the novice things, second semester can be, let's start looking at source evaluation and research and producing art. Like that's a huge win if you're able to get there. So don't worry about them not having their research skills to start, because some of that foundational stuff would just be reading comprehension, highlighting the material, starting to recognize the sources that are in the packet. And again, the whole reason for that was just access and improving the quality and making sure people didn't feel like there was a huge barrier to participation when, schools like mine or other schools that already have established policy programs, it does kind of run itself. We have juniors and seniors doing policy, and they're cool, and so the sophomores and ninth graders, they want to do policy. It's like, so it kind of helps itself. But starting out new, it was really tricky, because if you're like, I've never done policy debate, we're going to send some kids in there. They could be have a bad competitive experience against teams that had all of the evidence pre-made for them by varsity members. So it's a way of equalizing the playing field. So here's the biggest section of this, the how to use it, and I'll be showing you some of those. So we're going to click on the Dropbox. I'll go ahead and click on both just so you can see where they're at. Junior high coaches, this website, Utah Debate Coaches, there's a link to the middle school page as well. Once we
some stuff in there.
Yeah. Well, you can go to either one of these, and we'll try and eventually shift it. The middle school will always be a month behind, and not because they're we don't have our stuff together. It's just that almost like middle school is a reflection of what's happening in the high school, so the sequence has to happen a little bit. But so under resources, you can come down to, there's not, lesson plan stuff, but here's the novice evidence set. You'll see that there's, it's a lot, but this is it. Before there was infinite, how big is the World Wide Web? How many evidence files were produced at summer camps across the country at high school, So this is, there is a lot, but the idea is, the first term is not till October. You can graduate and slowly scaffold this in. I also have some tips for how to manage it, but you could download each one of these individually, or there's that Dropbox link where you could just, it's a little weird for projector-wise, but you could download the whole file at once. But download them. Don't have them view it online and try and click on. If they're doing the Saudi Arabia case, it's easy to click on that for reading purposes. Okay, but you can't manipulate it. You can't highlight it. So the idea would be you're downloading this file onto the computer, onto the iPad, so that they can, it's now their copy of it, and how they want to rearrange the evidence or how they want to highlight it, it's up to them. So I'll be showing you what that might look like.
For anyone that uses like Canvas, I've uploaded PDFs into Canvas so the students can access that one.
Sure.
The side about PDFs is they can't like, copy
Oh, yeah.
paste, like, the text sensitive files.
Yeah, I do. I use Google Docs ones as well.
And then, so if I have this. Projected to be.
Bless you.
So here it is all downloaded on my computer. The top file, that policy argument list, I'm going to be opening in a second, it's kind of a summary of, or a list of all of those arguments. Something I think you should share with your students, but it can be a way of almost like a table of contents, what's in the packet. These are the individual files. There are 3 affirmative cases to choose from. I think as a squad, as a team, it's a good idea to just pick one of those. And so like one of the earlier assignments could be everyone break up into 3 groups, review these different cases, give a little show and tell presentation, and then kind of debate amongst what do we think is the strongest, what do we think is the most interesting. Do we as a team want to be talking about Saudi Arabia this year, or this semester, Taiwan, or maybe a broader discussion about how our arms sales decisions conflict with human rights promotion values. But then you have different negative arguments, and you have access to all of these, but I'm not suggesting that you give them all to your students right away necessarily. We might say like affirmative style. Negative is the on-case direct responses to those affirmative plans, to the affirmative cases. So if one team says we should cut off arms sales to Saudi Arabia, they're using them for a horrible campaign in Yemen, and generally the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has been bad for human rights and the Khashoggi killing, among other things. We should not support them anymore. The responses to that particular plan, negative, Saudi Arabia, versus someone who says we shouldn't sell weapons to Taiwan anymore because it seems to be angering China and creating all sorts of extra international conflict in that area of the world. Your Saudi Arabian neg wouldn't apply to the Taiwan neg, so those are individual packets. But all of these are off-case arguments, which is something novices will eventually need to do. Disadvantages, DA. Counter plans, CP. Novice debate, no critiques, no theory, so those are them. But these are ones that maybe could be ran that apply to multiple cases. So Russia, DA, is an argument that says if the United States doesn't sell them, other countries will. The second largest arms supplier in the world is Russia. And if we were no longer selling to Saudi Arabia, or one of our close allies, Russia would swoop in and say, well, we got a list of products for you. You want precision guided bombs? We got those. You want this, and that not only complicates solvency, but it might expand Russia influence in the region, which is bad. That Russia fill-in argument could apply to Taiwan, could apply to any country we don't sell weapons to because of human rights. Defense industry would be kind of the economic component. A lot of the messaging around Trump's policy to expand arms sales is jobs and economic security from our, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, our defense industrial suppliers that make a lot, billions of dollars on these weapons sales. Again, you could read that kind of separate disadvantage, this economic defense industry DA, to any of those. But they kind of get to pick and choose there from the menu. AF answers, AFF, ANF, these are the kind of the other side to each one of those. So if they say, Russia DA, that's a negative argument, it's a disadvantage to the plan. The AF answers to the Russia DA are in that file. And so over time, they're taking these and starting to either organize them, pair through them, figure out, and create their own working documents to be prepared for a tournament. So a lot of these, I'll open up some of them and show you how they're organized. They are ready to make sense of, but they're not necessarily just what they would bring into a debate and start reading from top to bottom. It's stuff they have to plug and play. Questions about that so far? Yeah.
Counter plans, not in middle school, right?
Yes, allowed.
They are allowed.
Yeah, and so I'm not saying dump all of this on the students. You might start with the affirmative, and like I said, select that case. Then you're like, well, there are 3, and at a tournament, a team could read any one of those. So we need to be familiar with the negative side. So then you might give them the negative files, and again, break them up into groups, and you can divide the labor a little bit, like one person, or one group highlights and kind of rearranges for, like, here's our best 3 arguments against this case. Great. And then share that with everyone on the team or in the class. Other side, they make their presentation. So then they all feel, okay, we know what we want to say when it's our turn to be affirmative. We have some ideas when we're negative, and they could pick any one of those, what we'll say. But that's not enough to win. Let's start talking about disadvantages. And one at a time, share a document with them, new disadvantage. There are videos, that they could watch, little summary lecture videos in each one of them. You can give them highlighting assignments if you, worksheets, if you, study guides. I mean, those aren't all ready for you, but you could be the good teachers that you are to kind of teach to each one of those. And those could be different units, or, over time, they're getting more and more into their arsenal. But
And then the second question,
Yeah.
so with all of that evidence, they can change tags, they can cut and paste, rearrange.
yeah, as long as it doesn't deviate from the argument list that I'm going to pull up right now. So you couldn't say, pick a card from 4 different files and turn it into a new disadvantage that wasn't the defense industry advantage, or disadvantage, the Russia negative argument. Like, you're like, oh, well, this one's kind of talking about this international law piece and how it affects climate. And so I'm just going to jerry-rig this whole thing with a brand new argument. Can't do that. But you can. But yes, you can change the tags, you can delete cards, you can re-underline them. It's just that's still the deck. That's the deck of cards that you have, but you get to rearrange them in the order you want. Here we go. So, again, this is the high school resolution. NC Solar government should substantially reduce direct commercial sales and foreign military sales. Those are capitalized because they're official finance ways that the U.S. transfers weapons to other countries. The middle school won't have that official language because it's just a little intimidating. It'll just say reduce arms sales from the United States in one of the following areas. And semicolon, and those areas might look really similar to the 3 official plans the novice high school kids have. So they could say we're going to reduce sales to Saudi Arabia. That's one country, and that's all that they would focus on, that affirmative team. That's their plan. Separate one could be Taiwan. Third one, these are their only options. Third one is the more broad, across the board, any military corps that's found in violation of human rights, they lose their weapons. So those are the exact plan tags that they have. They would choose one of those and then go with the file. There are some topicality arguments, but here's those summaries I was talking about where, here's one that's a little more complicated. Allied proliferation. We have allies all over the world. Yeah.
Sorry, just real quick on topicality.
Yeah.
It says that the packet will provide some definitions.
Yeah, the new this year, the National Debate Coaches Association, which I worked with to create, made a novice evidence packet. In the past, they'd made one, but only adopted by a few independent schools. Illinois had one, Texas had one. We had our own packet. So new this year, we're just say whatever the NDCA, the National Debate Coaches Association, produces, that's what we'll use. Hopefully there's more, because they'll be making resources, like it'll line up more with what we're doing. They have not released the topicality one yet. So, but again, less important for no one should start their day one, week one. Let's get into nitty-gritty definitions debates. But good question. So one, the primarily designed to answer Taiwan affirmative. We have allies all over the world, but particularly in the South China Sea area, East Asia, Japan, South Korea, very, very important allies. What would they do if tomorrow the U.S. says we are no longer going to support Taiwan? We're no longer going to sell them weapons. Taiwan, big ally, kind of counterbalance to China. Might Japan and South Korea suddenly think our commitment to their alliance is also at jeopardy? They might have to take matters into their own hands to provide their own kind of safety net, their own security, which could be nuclear weapons, deterrence, So it kind of, but that would be the summary. If we look at what that packet includes then, so disadvantage, allied proliferation, new weapons. Take a moment. Again, this is the these are the affirmative answers to it right here. Here's what a file looks like. Same notes right at the top. It's in Word. You could convert these to Google Docs. You could convert them to PDF. In Word, you have the ability to kind of see this navigation pane. This acts almost like a table of contents where you have the first negative constructive and then some extensions for uniqueness, link, and impact. If you're feeling overwhelmed by this, realize that there are, like again, my emphasis was to talk about the packet, but there are really good videos, really good textbooks, and by small 50-page PDF article, but kind of organized as a textbook for readings, where you might have to learn as you go too, but where there would be a tutorial on what is a disadvantage. You just said uniqueness, link, impact. I don't know. If you're familiar with those, great. If not, there are little one-page readings. There are good video series, and those resources are linked to the bottom of that Google Doc I'll show you. But again, the evidence policy debate is evidence-focused. We call them cards. You heard Tanya kind of mention that. Here's the closed deck of cards. Each one of these files has a bunch of cards in it, pre-organized to be able to read, but a lot of extras to look at too. Sometimes what I'll have my students do, first thing is they might go into the link section, which is how does the plan link to the negative consequence? How does it cause something? Well, there's one card, two cards, that is a tag, cite, and the actual evidence. You can see, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. I might have one student say, I want you to read all 4 of those cards. I want you to choose the best one. Tell me why you thought it was best. It was recent, had a lot of good data, just powerful language, or it was short, so it was like easy to read, whatever. Great. Delete the other ones. If you've decided the best of those 4 is this one, great, then let's just delete from our file the other ones. And we're starting to simplify this file for more readability, usability in the debate round. But you have a first negative shell. First off is the outcrow of A. And so they say, A, unique link. The Taiwan-U.S. relations and commitments are high. Ending arms sales would crush broader regional assurances. It's kind of a little complicated. According to Wong in 2018, quote, I would read the rest of this part.
Can I ask a question on the cards?
Yeah.
How come some stuff is underlined, some's bolded, some's highlighted, some's
Great question.
bold? Like some have all underline, highlighting, and bolding. Like what?
Yeah. So people do it differently. But because, as you saw on the evidence guidelines, you need the full context, the paragraph above and below what you're reading, and not just the paraphrased one line. It's not just kind of referencing the article like you would in an extent speech or something. This is the actual text of the evidence that you're entering into the debate. So this whole paragraph was copy and pasted right off the website. Here's the full, works cited, full citation. Typically, you only have to say the author, last name, and year. They then, when someone was doing their research, copying it off of the website into a document, they would then actively read it and underline. So as they're going, oh, that's kind of a good line. That's okay. This is the main message of the card. Like you would in a class. You actively read this text. What's the takeaway? After that, and sometimes they would bold. Ooh, yeah. Look at this. Emphasize. A little more important. Highlighting them would be, what do you plan on reading out loud?
So the highlights are like the final step. Like, this is what I'll actually
And you can see how efficient they try and make it, where because the cards are so long, it could take a long time to read all of this. So even though you could say, the changing international structure foretells a competitive dynamic between the US and China. How does Taiwan fit into this? In the context of US-China security competition, Washington does have strong incentives to ramp up security cooperation with Taiwan in order to contain the growth of Chinese power. That would be, you could highlight all of that, say all of that out loud. What the students are realizing is they could also say, this evidence will speak to the dynamic between the US and China, and where Taiwan fits into that. But, quote, in US-China competition, Washington will have incentives to cooperate with Taiwan. It's the redux, the simplified quote. If cross-examined on this evidence or have to explain it in future speeches in their own words, because the first speeches are constructive and built a lot around reading evidence. Later speeches are more explaining that and going into more detail and concrete explanation. They could reference any part of the card again, but this is kind of what they've read. And so that's a little stylistically. You heard Tanya say she might even have students select what they want to read and copy it into a separate document. So they just have they can read straight through versus having to.
And then just have the card available.
And have the card available. I think that's an extra step that only complicates the debating, and it's busy work to say, all right, you have this card, it has the tagline, it has the source, and it has what you want to read with context. But I want you to take it all out. Or a student could just say, next off is the Allied Pro Lift Disadvantage. A subpoint, unique link, here's my tagline, read it. B subpoint, credible security commitments and assurances to our allies are key to prevent proliferation.
So to clarify,
Yeah.
So for novices and especially middle school, so the rule is, are they only allowed to use these cards?
Yeah.
So they can't create their own cards from other websites?
In middle school, they can do whatever they want. There's not a packet. They should lean on that existing evidence because their subset will be the same. Right, one of the subsets, right now, I'll already tell you, Taiwan and Saudi Arabia are one of the categories for middle school policy. Here's a whole case for them to read. But it's built for high school, both in length and probably amount of resources. So you might delete a bunch of, I'm giving you 10 cards from this, and it's going to take some time. You're a 7th grader, we're going to read this, we're going to confirm, check in, but they could, as part of your curriculum, say, let's do a Google search of the current Taiwan-China conflict, or let's do some research on the history of that relationship, and use quotes and use evidence in their case. So middle school has that limitation, but we've not, because so many middle school coaches, it's less about competition. There are just fewer tournaments, and just more about the standards and core for the state of doing research, writing, communication skills. And so and few kids might even go to the tournament. So they wanted most coaches, when we talked about it, have said, we want to be able to just come up with our own plans, exact wording, we want to be able to do our own research. Great. This is a little bit more the realities of high school is, for the most, you are going to tournaments, you are going to competitions, and while we don't value, as the apex order of things, winning, right? The students are competing. It's like if you were a football coach, you're like, this is first time coaching football, I don't know, help me out. Principal told me to do football, and here I am, never played it, right? It would be disingenuous to the team, or it would hurt the team if you just went and was like, all right, football, it's about teamwork, it's about strength, and it's about overcoming obstacles. So that's all we're gonna do. We're not going to talk about plays. We're not going to, try and win the game. We're not going to. And so part of this is that's the nature of the sport of policy debate. So there's sometimes less opportunity to do let's just do our original research and fail, and that's part of learning. Students going to their first tournament, they want to feel like we have what we need to win. Over time, we'll kind of eventually circle back on those authentic skills that we can build. Yes. So, again, this was that document that just had summaries. In this same one, you have the relevant text of our bylaws that actually speak to the novice list, and why we have it. Some Q&A, you can peruse that. But returning back to this working document, not that one, this one. If you are fortunate enough to have varsity policy debaters on your team, start to, anyone who's done it before, start to give them teaching opportunities. To teach the novice evidence packet, even though it says novice, they can use it. And it's like the reason these are the areas that we focus on is because they are the core controversies. They are the most rich for debate. And so your varsity students would like to do. But just, like I said, one assignment could be choose the best card, delete the rest. Let's make this file simple. Or some of the cards are highlighted already, others aren't. It could just be a highlight. You could go back and say, before I share this document with them, I'm going to copy and paste into my own document. I'm going to delete the tag. I'm going to have them practice. What would you come up with the tagline for this? Well, here's what the novice evidence packet. Maybe yours is better, right? And so you really can still break it up into learning assignments, but knowing that for anyone who wants to just get up and go, 8th graders or novices in high school who had middle school experience are like, we just want the files, we can let them have them. As I mentioned, there's some great resources to supplement the novice policy packet with curriculum. Just to show you real quick what they look like. This is from the NSDA and NFHS. You have these little 1-pager or 2-pagers. Some are actually a little long. Let's say it's like, all right, background on the arms sales topic. You click on it, it's a PDF, and it will load. This projector really isn't great. It's more colorful than that, but okay, this again for high school, but it's like a topic backgrounder, or what are the negative responses that we'll have. Some good visual stuff. You can print out these as packets to go over with your kids. If you're a member of the NSDA, the National Speech and Debate Association, big one, they have resource packages. You heard Tanya mention that they're trying to develop that learn button, trying to create more policy. There's a policy in a box unit where it actually will go through, here's day 1, day 2, day 3, teacher kit out of the box. But what I've done typically is, just because ultimately least in my classroom, debate is not like the other classes. I don't have the daily starter, we don't have worksheets, we don't have tests. It's not like, we don't have the textbook the same way. It's more workshop, it's more, way more flexible. I might do something like, well, there's a good demonstration debate on that, but I might do, this Go Fight Win series is awesome for novice debate. It could be, here's the format. She's real bubbly. She did this whole project. She's like real bubbly girl who knows a lot about debate. It's like, here's some good. So, opportunity to flip the classroom. Like, watch this video, then we'll talk about it. You could be how to introduction to debate, refutation, debating the DA. There's like a lot on there. How to cut the disadvantage. How do you make? And you pair that with this one's my favorite. Policy debate manual. Makes it seem so official. There aren't actually very few rules and how-to guides, but overall it's 50 pages. You could print this out double-sided, give them a binder if you wanted. Or what I've done is I typically say, all right, we might take a day learning about disadvantages. Page 26. Scroll down there real quick. Disadvantages, right? I print this page off, back side is the other, that's it, that's answers to popcorn reading, read this first one, here's the little diagram. Okay, let's walk through what is a disadvantage, the basic components. Let's see if we can identify those components in the defense industry disadvantage, which maybe is a separate little printout, or maybe you're projecting it. Oh yeah, 1, 2, 3, the same pieces are there. And then it might be a where did we go? Go Fight Win on the disadvantage. Put in your headphones, use your iPad, or maybe this is a, like you said, flipped classroom thing where the night before they watch the video and then in class you're going over the disadvantage. I don't know if I'll have sound on this, but you don't hear it at all? No. I was gonna say maybe turn the volume, but it's it's pretty well produced. And so slowly but surely over the idea is over maybe the first 6 weeks before that first competition, you will have slowly shared the evidence packet, started to learn the components, and getting ready to compete. Questions? There are many, I'm sure, still in your mind, but.
So I have more clarification.
Yeah.
So for the first semester, they're using the evidence in the packet.
Yes.
Is there evidence also on the
There's UDCA, NFHS. I know there's a ton, but
the speech and debate site? Is there evidence there also? Is that the same evidence?
it's the exact same. It's
Okay.
just for multiple places. So it's like if you have Dropbox, you could download it all at once. Google Drive. I'll do what I can. Like for people who are Google schools can do that. If you wanted to print it out. The one thing I'll say about the printing, just so you know, is
They're huge.
they're big, and so it's usually
800 pages each.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if they're that big, but they can
Can
be.
get pretty big.
Yeah. Well, but I'll say one of the reasons for that is policy debate, even more now in the middle school. So our middle school team does paper. but we're going up against teams with laptops and iPads and stuff. And in the high school, we're all using laptops for policy. There's just too much evidence. But so to make it readable on a computer more efficiently, the files are typically created with this assumption that you're reading it electronically. And that means the view, I have a Mac, so you might not look the same, is not in print layout, it's in this draft or outline mode. Look what happens when I go to print layout. First page.
Oh, that's probably what mine are saying.
Second page.
Yeah, that's what I get
Oh,
when I
okay.
print them.
Then here's the, and then it kind of goes on to the next page. So you might be able to staple that, but whereas if it was on the outline or draft mode, it deletes all that, but it's a way of kind of providing an outline structure so they know what am I about to read, what's the subpoints underneath that. So before I would print, you might doctor the file or delete stuff, or maybe you print it once and then you take out those pages. So it's still a lot of stuff, but again, the mission, the idea was, it's a lot of resources, but at least there is an endpoint, and there is something that you can ask questions about, everyone be on the same page. Before this packet, people could stick their head in the sand and say, we have what we need, 10 pages of evidence, we're going to our first tournament, we feel pretty good about this. And teams that have robust policy programs, or kids that went to summer camps and got hundreds of pages, that you're just gonna get smoked. And then they feel like, well, we're not good at debate, we quit, we go to a different event that doesn't require evidence. So it's like, so much of my coaching is not the mechanics and the how-to, it's just the psychology, it's just the motivation, it's the stick-to-itiveness, it's trying to kind of keep them plugging away and assuring them that every other kid in the state, in the country, whatever, is having the same anxiety, the same kind of overwhelm, the same kind of intimidation. They have the same packet though, so no surprises. Well, it's kind of erasive. Who can try and absorb this the quickest? But you have a long time. It's not just one test, one tournament. Other questions?
How do you, I don't know if we'll come to this question or not, but typical structure of a case when you're having your students put together their affirmative case?
Yeah.
'Cause I was always just taught like the 5 stock issues, but then when
Yep.
you look at these cards, they're like a lot more complicated than that, like advantages and like all the different things.
Yeah, and stock issues are still fine. The thing that separates policy from all the other events is that it's plan focused. The reason it's called policy is there's a policy that you officially propose, whereas other events it might just be a pro-con. Standardized testing in schools, good or bad. There's not a what's your plan to fix,
Address the issue.
address the issue, and so these have policies. Those policies address a need. That need will have a significant harm attached to it. That policy should address it by proving solvency. Right. So the stock issues, if you know that, that's fine. But
The way I was
more and
first
more,
like,
it's seen as the advantage has both. If we don't do something, there's a problem, and if we don't do something about it, it's going to be really bad. That's the inherency and the harms built into it.
so
Here's our plan.
advantages usually have inherency and harms built in.
Yeah, and some even will just inherency, harms, solvency, and it'll just be all right. So our first advantage. So one for the Taiwan affirmative, there's 2 advantages, 2 harms areas. One is the rising conflict that could happen between China and Taiwan as Taiwan buys more and more advanced weapons and China keeps provoking them more. They want the one China policy. That could be a war, that'd be really, really bad. De-escalating the situation by withdrawing our arms, lets China withdraw its arms, no war. The second advantage is about U.S. improving our relationship with China, which is really bad right now, tariffs and trade war, and maybe us doing this gesture, pretty important gesture for them. They want Taiwan for national and cultural reasons and historic reasons, but that would facilitate broader cooperation, a return to a better relationship with China. So those advantages have a U.S.-China relationship is low now, it's not working, that's our inherency, because of our commitment to Taiwan. if we don't improve our relationship with one of the world's largest powers, we're not going to solve issues like climate change. We're going to have more trade, tariff wars. That's going to be bad. Significant harms. Removing arms sales is a key issue that Chinese officials have said is a prerequisite to product cooperation. Those three are there. Next advantage. So it has the components, but instead of being like all my inherency, all my significant harms, all my solvency, and then a plan, to make it a little bit more narrative where the pieces are there, but it's more of ultimately, here's my plan, the advantages to these plans, the benefits, U.S.-China relations improved, risk of war decreased.
So that's usually how you go about having the structure, just like state your case, your plan, and then go on to advantages.
Yeah, and some might look a little different. This human rights affirmative has, because it's dealing with a little bit more moral, ethical things, it has this advantage. It talks about how right now U.S. is invaluing human rights in their arms trafficking or arms sales. That's emboldening autocrats. It's just being really bad. It's putting profit over people. We'll give a couple examples: Philippines and Nigeria.
So,
then
these
the plan,
cards,
solvency. So this was like significant harms inherent.
So are those built to like follow each other? Like it would ruin the kind of construction argument if they just took some of those cards out, right? That advantage case is built to read that way, right?
Yes, but you could say I don't have time to go over two examples.
Okay.
I'll take out Nigeria as one example. I don't need all of these. No, you could definitely clear that. You had 4 solvency, or it looks like 3 solvency cards. You could get away with 1. And so certainly for middle school, 5-minute 1AC instead of 8 minutes in high school. So this is built for more of an 8-minute speech. You have to pare it down. So yeah. Next session, right? Or oh no, we actually can 10. Keep the questions coming. I thought we only had to 10. Or poke around if you have your laptop. If you want to see if you can actually download the file. Or
so this will be about the same packet in middle school.
Yeah, but the middle school's never given out a packet, even if we were like, here's some resources that are available to look at. And I probably see myself going through at least the case areas. Probably won't do it for the off-case arguments, because not everyone does off-case disadvantages and counterplans. They're just like, here's our plan, the advantages, here's our kind of attack to that, we'll attack inherency, so is take those and delete a bunch of the stuff and repost it on middle school. And usually the schools that have returning students or a lot of support will find those other files. Like you could go right now, high school students, varsity, this is the next area we'll be looking at. But
I didn't see they have the 2019 up yet. Do they?
They do.
Am I looking in the wrong spot?
It doesn't. The link doesn't have it, but it is up. I personally uploaded some of these. But in high school there are summer camps. There are middle school camps as well, I guess, but it's far less rigorous. Every summer camp, usually at universities from Michigan, Gonzaga, Northwestern, they produce evidence on this year's topic. They then share that online on this wiki. It's called the Open Evidence Project. To democratize and be transparent, let everyone have access to those resources. But the point being not that you should go here, it's to show you that we are oversaturated with evidence. What you can do as a coach is pare down these resources to give to them, to let them work. But in novice, it was to not say, look at all of these files that you can go into. Pick what you want, right? Or, build your own case. I don't really know what it should look like, but, do it. It's really hard.
On the question of topicality, though, I have a few pretty experienced policy debaters, and it's nice that you can filter it by the side.
Topicality, let's see what T substantial from Sanford, or T definitions. So my point is, I think for the middle school, pare it way down, like 10 cards per file instead of 30. And if they're like, we need more, at that point, the people who know they need more, want more, also are familiar enough, or they just ask a question and I can say, well, look at the high school files; those were 3 times as long. Well, we want even more, because there's no argument limit in middle school. The world's your oyster. Yeah. Might as well then do a little quick temperature for the junior high. I was thinking, talking to Leslie Robinette, she's Canyon School District administrator for that. She thinks countries more than areas, either like weapons technology type or something. So it could be something like United States federal government should substantially reduce its arms sales to one of the following countries.
I like the
Saudi
human rights
Arabia.
one,
I
I
believe
I think that
on
one
human
would be-
And that's what I thought too. But so
Well, I think I like those 3 areas: Taiwan, Saudi Arabia, and human rights. I really like that.
okay. Because just as other options could have been, like, you could say small arms or drones or high tech missiles, or you could do the Taiwan, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Mexico, or
Israel.
yeah. That's why it's like all these like, ooh, these are good controversies. Or it's like it doesn't. I think Saudi Arabia has to be there. It's just all in Congress when they're debating arms sales. It's all in context of Saudi Arabia. Taiwan is big and significant. There's some cool history that goes with that, but I could see cutting Taiwan if there was another area that was really important.
Israel would be nice.
Even with Israel, then it's like that's another Middle East area. You just had Saudi Arabia. Like
Yeah.
the idea was like, what about other parts of
Well,
the world?
the U.S.-China relationships are huge.
Yeah. Is three good? Last year we had 4.
I think human rights is huge, though. That's a really broad
Yeah.
area.
And you get to talk. You get to at least talk about that in the context of Saudi Arabia. But that version allows you to say more broadly the cost-benefit analysis equation that the U.S. currently has is off, including economics first, or maybe just our alliances, military alliances first, instead of human rights.
I like this too.
So say the resolution one more time.
The
The middle school wording, not the high school.
Yeah, so the middle school, I'll just show you this. It's like 92. This was one, these are different options, but that would have been the one with just countries. Here's one where I said the list could be Saudi Arabia, Taiwan, and human rights. But it's definitely the United States should substantially reduce its arms sales from the United States.
So when we say arms, are we going to discuss specifically what we mean by that? Because you just mentioned we could have subcategories of drones and other things like that. So if we go along with this resolution with these 3 topic areas, are we just broadening the term of arms to?
Well, the idea
That
would
would
be
come down to definitions, right? Like how are we
yeah,
defining
arms sales are,
or-
it can be small arms, like we sell AK-47s, but we also sell missile defense shields and F-16 fighter jets, and so what this allows is you could say, as a middle school, we want to talk about Saudi Arabia. We'll be topical because our plan will be reducing arms to Saudi Arabia, but we're going to get specific and say we're going to cut off end sales of the precision guiding airstrike bombs. We've done some research and it seems like the biggest problem in Yemen is that they're just bombing hospitals with their jets and going back home, bombing schools. And let's get rid of those air-guided bombs, but the rest, fine, keep it. The human rights one might be, we've noticed that the biggest cause of structural violence and human rights violations are not the big high-tech weapons, it's the small arms. It's just liquidating, oversaturation of handguns in Mexico or Nigeria or Philippines. We should reduce those. So you can get more specific, but the topic is supposed to be arms sales, selling of arms, of weapons.
Okay. Can you scroll down real
Yeah.
fast and show us the
These are just the LD ones I'm going to be pushing, FYI. This was a topic last year in high school, so there's lots of good like essays and packets of evidence, and it aligns with the idea behind the policy topic as well. But for middle school, I think we're still going to do that first semester, second semester topic. So I don't know which one that will be, but LD, do you like any of these?
Do we have any, one of the biggest?
For a second, like there were two LD topics, one in the first half of the year, one in the second half.
So because that one kind of matches up with what we're doing in policy, would that be our second semester?
Probably for the state tournament. And really, this goes officially, tournaments can do whatever they want. And just because it's the topic that the UDCA came up with, that only matters when the UDCA hosts a tournament, which will be the state tournament. And so it would be bad to not align with that, but technically you could do whatever you wanted at individual tournaments. I imagine what I'm pushing for, no one's pushing back, I'm just saying we just got to decide, is the United States ought not provide military to authoritarian regimes. Kind of that human rights value versus security will be for the state tournament, which will be in the second semester.
Okay, I like that.
But the first semester, and a lot of junior high programs won't even see their students until the second half of the year. I won't. But others like, hey, we're meeting this week, and we're going to start going over LD eventually after we do our basics about argumentation and speaking. What are we going to do? You could pick any topic in your classroom that you want, but it might be one of these or other suggestions. I don't know if any of those stand out to you as a particular good LD topic.
Pretty much whatever is going on in the spring is really all that you can compete with, right?
Not the Kansas School District, they have an October tournament and a January one. I think January they still use the first wave.
One first semester and one second semester. So.
Yeah. And part of it is like possibly the collaboration. So certainly any district that has multiple programs might say, all right, we've chosen whether voting should be mandatory in a democracy. And that will help. Leslie can send out more resources instead of, what are you doing in your classroom? Are you doing universal basic income? Maybe I can help find. The more people are doing it, the easier it is to say, bang for our buck, here's a resource that we can share, because it's going to affect multiple people. Even if they're not going to a competition, they're presumably doing some practice debates in class. I don't know, did you like last year's oppressive government?
I don't want to do that again.
Okay.
I'll have some returning students, and I want them to be challenged with
fair
their
enough.
stuff. I thought it was a cool topic.
Do we have any? I'd like to do a more scientific topic. My favorite topic we've done so far was the human enhancement
Enhancement one, that
technology.
one was really cool. I like standardized tests though, because I think that our students have a little bit of background and a little bit of buy into that one. And I like voting too.
Yeah, and this was like this is the official one for high school for September, October.
So there would probably be resources too on that.
Yeah, all of these have been are existing.
Are these all ones that MSDA approved?
Yeah, nationals last year was this Violent Revolution one, and then these are past years. But
I like the
still,
standardized tests. I think that'd be a good one to start with too. I think our students have more and I think they can wrap their heads around it.
It felt like it was. It shocked me as a not really an LD topic initially when it came out. Public forum maybe, or more of like a book, but it does get. It obviously can be an LD topic. All right, well that's our time. If you don't have a packet, I got one up here if you need to know where you're going next, or where you want to go next.
Are you doing the advanced policy as well?
Yep. And Tabram might be a good one. I mean, we're going to stay here. I'm just saying Tabram, we're moving. Middle school will be more and more on Tabram, less and less on Speechwire.
Our district used entirely Tabram.
Yeah. But I know that was a transition year, and it wasn't without its overwhelming. But if you feel like now I'm... Or new coach stuff, that's in 122.
Obviously,